I was calling to talk about abortion and bodily autonomy argument.
Is this rooted in a theist like thing? Like, are you going to say this doesn't work because God, or is it a different thing entirely? I'm just curious.
Yeah, good question. This was not because of religion. So Mhm. I usually say if I became an atheist today, I'd be pro-life tomorrow.
Okay, that's fine. Just I was curious as to what angle we were going to come from. Okay, so why
Oh,
does it not work to say that the bodily autonomy of someone with a uterus supersedes this need for them to carry a pregnancy that they don't want?
And sorry, just before we get into it, I did talk to you about 2 years ago on another show, and
Cool.
we just warned you. We were talking about Dragon Ball Z a little bit. I asked if you would ever go see that movie for it. Did you ever get to go see that movie? It was about 2 years ago. You get to not.
I don't remember. I do. The one thing I remember, somebody told me the one time I looked something up about Dragon Ball Z. Somebody told me to watch the end when Goku voips some guy, I think Cell, to another planet and destroys that planet or something like that. Happened. Somebody made a joke about like something and it tied into that, and then somebody told me to look it up, and I looked that up. That's the only time I've ever looked into the Dragon Ball Z thing from a call. So I'm sorry, I don't remember
All right, fair enough.
what that is.
Fair enough. So, other than that, I'll hop into it. I think
Please.
after the last call, I kind of forgot a little bit of what I was going to say, but I'm pretty much going to
That
go.
happened to all of us. We all lost some brain cells during the last call. Carry on.
That was rough. It was real rough.
Not going to be rude to the other guy. It's shit. It was very long. Um,
It was long and weird. Just
Carry
like
on, Gold.
my usual
long and
my usual stance is when it comes to bodily autonomy, that gives you a right for self defense, even using lethal force in self defense. But you're only allowed to use lethal force in self defense if there is a high enough level, uh, high enough risk level of severe harm that can come to you. And if that hasn't been met, then you're not allowed to use lethal force. And abortion is a form of lethal force. So unless there's enough high risk of severe harm, you can't do an abortion.
okay. Um, I have two major issues with that. Paul, do you want to start or do you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay. Um, hold on, let me just take a note here.
There you go.
And okay, so a couple of things. Number one, you're talking about lethal force and an abortion, and you're conflating these terms, and you're saying that lethal for that abortion is a lethal thing. And I get where you're coming from. You're saying that you're killing this embryo or this whatever. Um, the issue is that the all abortion is terminating a pregnancy. And so whether it's a miscarriage is medically called a spontaneous abortion. So like anytime you terminate a pregnancy, anytime a pregnancy stops, that is abortion. That often does result in that, the embryo, fetus, child, whatever you want to call it, dying. But that's not like the point. It's not like you're going in there like deliberately killing a kid. You are just ending pregnancy for yourself. And I think that the distinction between those terms is really important. And the reason why is you can extend that to people that are alive right now, like people that aren't, in the womb, that we can talk about people we know exist. Um, if Paul had my same blood type, and I was in kidney failure and I was going to die and I needed blood, and I stuck a needle with a tube into his arm and started filtering his blood into me, he has the right to remove that tube. It wouldn't kill him to leave the tube in. There's no lethal force being applied to him. It is self-defense, but he's not like being at risk of death from me taking some of his blood for myself. But he still has the right to remove that tube from his arm, even though that will result in my death. He is not killing me. He is choosing for himself what his body is doing and who his body is sustaining. And that, in essence, is what I see with pregnancy, is that if you have an abortion, you're not killing a fetus, you are terminating a pregnancy. You are deciding what happens to your body and who your body is sustaining, and you have the right to do that, whether it's an embryo or a baby or a full-grown adult. Does that make sense?
Do you mind if I respond to that really quick?
I hope you do. That's I'm just clearing up because I think that's my answer to what you just said. So please give your answer to what I just said. Yes.
Sounds fair. So it sounds like you were saying if you attack Paul or something like that, and then if you require his blood and you stick him for a blood transfer, he has the right for self-defense to remove that blood transfer and let you die. That's pretty much what you were saying.
That's
Okay,
the long
so-
and short
so
of it. Yeah,
far-
he would be killing me. He would be protecting himself and how do you say, exercising his bodily autonomy, even if it resulted in my death. He's allowed to do that.
Now let's say when you attacked him, far-fetched, like you had a heart attack or something, and that's why you need the blood. So if he refuses to give you the blood, what are you dying from?
In the specific example that I gave, it would be renal failure, and it would be blood
Okay.
toxicity. But it
Okay.
doesn't really matter. You
So
can take it
you're
to
not-
be whatever you want.
So you're not dying from him not giving you the blood. You're dying from renal failure, correct?
In the same way that if we were to terminate a pregnancy, that embryo isn't dying from being stabbed or they are dying because they're no longer connected to a uterus.
They're always killed before they're disconnected. The mifepristone, there's two drugs. The first one they use kills the organism. The second one is used to flush out the organism. So they are always killed, even if it's a DNE. I mean, they're chopped up before taken out then, but if it's from a medical, then they are killed first with medicine to stop growth and sometimes called a heart attack, but it usually stops growth, and that's the definition of killing.
Sure. So
They are still the poor.
let's go further with it then. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you up, and I want to get to the point here. Then
You're
let's
good.
take that example and say I'm connected to Paul in such a way by some magical, I don't know, whatever, some device that necessitates my heart stop beating before it can be disconnected. So Paul, by removing the tube from his arm, is actually killing me. Again, I don't think that's actually I don't know for sure how this works. I don't think what you're saying is accurate. I'm not a medical doctor. None of that is the point. Just rolling with what you're saying. If it was necessary that Paul end my life in order to protect his own bodily autonomy, I would still say he's right to do that. Do you agree?
Yes. This is very similar to the violinist. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
No, but did you just say that you did agree with me?
Correct.
Okay, so then what's the difference between Paul killing me by disconnecting me from his body and someone with a uterus killing this this fetus by disconnecting it from their body?
I mean, I would try to answer this with if Mr. Paul agrees that the violinist argument is a good analogy. Can I answer it with that?
I don't know
Well,
what it is. Would you mind?
Pretend you don't. Forrest gave an example that is close enough to the violinist argument that you can just use Forrest's example. Whatever you can just translate whatever answer you're going to give to the one Forrest gave. You agreed that it was very similar. So let's not assume the audience knows or waste time repeating it.
Okay, that's fair. So I would say, if there was a certain circumstance that put you in a situation where you need to be connected, and the removal of that connection would kill you, I would say that's still you dying of whatever previous position you were in before. And
The thing is rigged up in such a way that literally the removal of the device itself is what kills me. It's wrapped around my heart and penis. I don't know.
This is what I want to get into for the second option. If it is like not something that it just kind of like came naturally like that. Yeah. So if the removal of it will kind of like kill your heart or tear out your heart or rip out other organs, I would still say that he does not have the responsibility to keep you attached to him the same way.
Right.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
agree. So someone with a uterus does not have the responsibility to keep an embryo attached to them, even if the removal is directly killing that embryo. They have the right over their body, and they get to decide who their body sustains. And if killing that embryo is indeed the only way to remove it, then so be it. They're protecting themselves. Pregnancy is not a benign condition. It very easily can be life-threatening. No matter what, it is life-altering. And they have every right in the world to decide what to do with their body. And if you disagree with that and say that, no, actually, this fetus has the right to be there that supersedes this person's right to decide what happens inside their uterus, then you would be claiming that this fetus has special extra bonus rights that you don't have when you're alive. Furthermore, you have to sign up to be an organ
My
donor.
response to that,
You have to agree. Hold on, I'm finishing my sentence. You have to agree to donate your organs. If I die and Paul needs my heart and I'm not signed up as an organ donor, we're both dying. So, in the end, all we're doing here is we're applying the exact same rights to a fetus, embryo, baby, whatever you want to call it, while it's in the womb, as we would to literally anybody else, rather than saying that fetuses and corpses have more rights than anybody with a uterus.
can I get a quick response really quick?
Please.
Please do.
So I definitely hear that side of the argument. I think I might lose you with this counterpoint, but it comes down to the relationship between you and Mr. Paul versus a parent and child. Biologically, that is the parent's child until someone else can take over. They have the responsibility of providing a
Okay. Switch the exact, take the exact same argument that I have just given you, except swap out Paul for my own mother. My mother, I am a 32-year-old man. I go find my mom and I plug a needle into her arm that wraps around my heart and penis or whatever the fuck else. If she removes a needle, I will die instantaneously. Does she have the right to defend herself? Or is she obligated to continue letting me use her blood?
So that's where my high risk of severe harm. If there's no high risk of severe harm, then she's obligated to not kill you.
So no, she's not.
Now, as a 32-year-old man, I can force my mother to give me her blood. You think that is the case?
Wait, sorry. So I'm combining two premises here. One, that this was
Let me rephrase
something
it.
that just
Let me
happened.
rephrase it.
You did not witness any of this. Secondly, there's high risk of severe harm.
Let me rephrase it. It is or not even rephrase it, restate it to make sure we're talking about the same thing. I'm talking about the exact same scenario, word for word, that I just gave you with Paul, only swap the word Paul for my mom. So I go find my mom. I'm in kidney failure. I stick a needle in her arm that wraps around my heart and penis. I need her blood to survive. If she removes the needle from her arm, I will instantly die. She will be killing me. Does she have the right to remove the needle and to say, I don't care if you die, I have a right over my body? Or is she obligated now, as a whatever the fuck old, I think she's like 60 something, as a whatever how old a woman she is she obligated to sustain and nourish me, a 32-year-old man, right now?
I mean, so kind of going back really quick, I would say no, based off of dependency. Unless you put yourself in that situation, then yeah, she could disconnect herself automatically. If it was like a situation that arrived,
It doesn't matter how I got there. It doesn't matter how I got there. I need blood.
So let's just
I need her blood specifically. And I'm taking her blood. Does she have the right to say that another adult human, even if it is her child, does not get to just have her blood and she can decide what to do with her body?
I'm not too sure about adult human. I would say 5-year-old kid, no. Adult human, I would say, yeah, she probably can really. If you're a
when is the
5-year-old kid,
point?
go to,
When exactly is the point where I, in my life, lost the right to use my mother's body and organs in ways that she did not want me to? At what point in my life?
that's easy.
What birthday?
Yeah, that's when you come of age, you kind of take care of yourself. In America, we say that they cute, but it's whenever you
Okay, so
come of
you're
age.
telling me. So when I turned 18, I registered for the draft and I lost the fundamental right to steal my mother's blood. Is that what you're telling me?
I mean, so I have 2 kids right now, and they steal parts of my organs every single day that I don't want them to. And
But you have a choice. You could give them up for adoption.
Also,
so
that is a
it-
gross.
it-
That is also, Gohan, a gross oversimplification of what we're talking about. We are talking about actually physically living inside of your body and using your organs to sustain themselves.
Yeah, let's not
Your
get distracted by.
If one
but
of your
James,
kids were to, if one of your kids needs a kidney right now or a liver transplant, are you, as their parent, legally required or morally required to give it to them?
I'm not required to keep them alive beyond normal circumstances, but I am required to.
And so,
Let's say
it's
we're
the
having a
exact same
baby,
thing
I
if
ain't
they were
required to
living.
use my body.
It's the exact same
I
thing
am
if they were living in your body as opposed to just in your house. They live in your house and you don't need to give them your liver if they need a liver. It's not necessary. You'll find another way around it. If they were living in your body, you would also have the right to say, hey, you don't get to use my organs anymore.
So either way, you're saying if they're in my body, I have the right to kill them. And,
I'm saying you have
get
the
'em
right
out,
to
but
remove them from your body, even if that
Yep.
results in their death.
if it results in the death or if killing them is the way that I get them out.
Yeah, that's a weird semantic.
Yes.
You're using a weird semantic there. Like
What,
abortion
killing?
pragmatically could be done. Abortion pragmatically, and we're taking your word for it, and I actually am highly dubious. But you're hinging your whole argument on a potential pragmatic choice that the doctors make. If I'm just going to grant you that you're correct, pragmatically, they absolutely could do it in the opposite. They absolutely could remove them first and let like that is a thing that could be done. So you are hinging your whole argument.
If they remove a 24-week-old fetus and they kill it, is that not a live birth followed by a killing of a 24-week-old fetus? That's now a baby.
No
Or do
one
that
is
kill
born
the
if he is
child?
outside of the womb.
Yeah, no.
So if they take a 24-week fetus and take it outside their womb, what is that now? Is that a baby that was born alive? Or do they have to kill it to make sure that doesn't burst?
So that would be about halfway through a pregnancy. So this is a non-viable thing that cannot live on its own, as far as I know. Again, not a medical doctor.
Sure. Let's talk about 10 weeks.
But we're talking about something that cannot live on its own. It would die all on its own. That's, yeah.
Talk about
even
10 weeks. If you take a 10-week-old fetus out while it's still alive, once it's out,
I give you the exact same answer.
It is a baby. It is a baby, and you are not allowed to kill
No,
it.
it isn't. So I disagree
what are you
with that
talking-
analysis.
If
But
it's
even
born,
if we
it's a
agree,
baby.
that any clump of cells with unique DNA at any stage ever that comes out of a uterus is now considered a baby, if we were to agree on that, it doesn't change my stance one bit. You have a right to decide who is living in your body.
But you don't have the right to decide who you can kill unless there's high risk of severe harm.
You're not killing, you are ending a pregnancy.
But this is where it is important that we finalized if I'm right or wrong. They
No,
if
because in all the
how
scenarios you just gave, you absolutely could take whatever is alive out of it and put it on the table and let nature take its course. That is a thing that could pragmatically be done. We wouldn't necessarily believe that's the best way for things to happen, but that's all. But you're arguing within procedure, not the morality of it.
that's not something that happens. Though. We can agree that right now, the way that
Pragmatically, hey, go ahead. Pragmatically, the way I described it is a way it could be done. So you were talking about a procedure. You were talking about a procedure versus whether this is a moral choice. If you want to advocate that abortion is fine, but it should be done in a different way, neat.
Yeah, that's fine.
So this is where why I was talking about duties as a parent. If you put your kid in a pool who can't swim and they die because you just didn't want to be a parent anymore, you said, you know what?
You voluntarily, parents who are taking care of live children are voluntarily entering into a contract to take care of that child.
I just said right now it's going against my bodily autonomy to carry my 6-month-old right here. Let it go in the pool. Whatever happens, happens. I wash my hands of it.
That is a fundamentally and obviously different thing. And it's ridiculous for you to try to conflate the two.
Can I hear why?
Because it's not a bodily autonomy question.
It's not.
This is a big one for me. But if you convince me I'm wrong, that would be huge.
Because, so a couple of things. Number one, because you have already had these children and are already taking care of them. Of course, you have bodily autonomy to decide that you don't want to anymore. There are options that you can take to make sure that it's not arbitrary. It's not arbitrary at all. If you let me finish my point, we get there. So you have already entered into this, and now you have steps to take to preserve both of your bodily autonomy and also the lives of those children. In the case of someone who is pregnant, if we agree with what you're saying these medications do, which again, I can't stress enough, I don't. But even if we were agreeing with it, if that's the only way that we can get through this, then we are still fundamentally protecting someone's bodily autonomy. That still matters. Also, we can then get into discussions over personhood and at what stage somebody becomes a person. But that was one of the reasons why Roe v. Wade was passed in the first place, because literally nobody, medical, scientific, psychological, philosophical, could agree. The point is, saying I could just let my kids drown today so that I stop having to worry about them is the same thing as saying I should have an abortion because I'm the victim of rape or incest or something, or I can't financially, emotionally, bodily, whatever, take care of this kid, or I just physically don't want to, or I'm sick, or I'm hurting, or whatever. Any reason under the sun, I want my body to work the way I want my body to work. Those are grossly disproportionate and inappropriate things to compare.
Okay. So I hear your point. So I don't agree with it. If my bodily, you said in a point that you have to worry about both your bodily autonomy and the health of the kid. With let's say it's a 6-month-old that's already been born.
Sure.
I'm the only person other than the kid around for 10 miles, and all of a sudden my bodily autonomy says I don't want to carry this 6-month-old anymore. If I wanted, can I leave it outside in the middle of the blizzard because my bodily autonomy is saying no more? Or like
you're using the word bodily autonomy. You're using the word bodily autonomy in a way that it is never used legally. You seem to be now claiming that I can drive over people on the sidewalk because I wanted the bodily autonomy to not hold onto my steering wheel. Like you are using bodily autonomy. So but you're trying to say the bodily autonomy argument doesn't carry, and then you are attempting to find situations. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I would like you to finish what you were saying, because I think what you were saying was very important, Paul. But
you define bodily autonomy.
bodily autonomy would be using the components of your body in the way that you choose.
How does that not apply to driving or carrying my 6-month-old?
It's the right to make decisions about your body and decide what your body is doing and how
yeah.
it's being utilized. It
Well, if I don't
doesn't
want my elbow to
necessarily
be at 90
that
degrees
doesn't
flexion,
Gohan saying that I have the right to make decisions about my body does not then extend to say I have the right to make decisions about someone else's body. So I don't get to drive my car on the sidewalk or leave a kid out in the rain to die because I'm using my body however I want to, and that involves killing people. And that is
I'm sorry, I
fundamentally
think you just
different
became
than
pro-life.
saying I am not. I'm going to put you on mute because you keep fucking interrupting us at this point. And it's really annoying. We are saying that you have the right to choose what happens to your body and how you use your body, but your rights end at the limits of someone else's body. There's that old saying, the freedom to swing my fist ends at your nose, right? So I don't get to say, I have autonomy over my body. I would like to go kill somebody today, and that's my bodily right to do so. That doesn't make any sense. It does, however, make sense to say, I have a right to my own body. Therefore, I'm not going to allow someone to hurt me to sustain themselves. I'm not going to let someone live inside of myself. If the freedom to use my body ends at someone else's body, then someone living inside my body is certainly under the jurisdiction of my bodily autonomy, seeing as they're in it. These are very different things. And the fact that you're pretending that they're not is gross and inappropriate. I will now bring you back.
So first, I just want to say I'm sorry. We kind of work on it. I know I interrupt too much. Sorry about that. But
I appreciate you taking
trying to work.
accountability. That's fine. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I talk to my wife. She'll say the same thing. So what I wanted to say was I made a quick quid that probably wasn't appropriate, but when you said that your right to use bodily autonomy ends where someone else is dying, I said, if you think you just became pro-life, probably not appropriate. I'm just that maybe not the best.
If you listen to the rest of what I just said, you will have heard why that isn't true.
Yeah, sure. So I'm still confused on why me, and this is what I was trying to say before, me keeping my arm at like 90 degrees double flexion and maybe 30 degrees abduction to hold a child is, let's say, for 10 minutes. Let's say I just don't want to do that anymore. How is that not my bodily autonomy to say, no, I don't want to do this anymore?
It's not because the child doesn't need. The child doesn't. The child doesn't need your body to live. The child doesn't need any part of you. It doesn't need any of your cells. It just needs your actions, and you have. Your child does not need any cell from your body. You could be separated from plastic for the rest of your life, and you could still parent that child.
Mm-hmm.
And it still goes against my bodily autonomy because I don't want to use.
No, you don't understand what bodily autonomy is.
That's the thing.
You
keep conflating the term bodily autonomy being the rights to how your body is utilized, what's going on with it, who gets to live in you, things like that, with personal responsibility, with duty of care, with legal responsibility in a society. You keep using the word bodily autonomy in place of words like individual freedom or words like, just wanton desire to do whatever. And that's not at all what those things are. That's why I keep saying these are inaccurate and inappropriate comparisons, because it is diminutizing how serious bodily autonomy actually is. I have bodily autonomy. That does not mean that I get to kill anybody. That does not mean that I get to starve anybody. That doesn't mean that I get to go kick people or drive my car stupid or anything like that. These are differences. And when we talk about children that are already alive, I don't like to conflate legality and morality too much, but we do have a framework for how you need to take care of that kid. That's what duty of care is all about. So that's a fundamentally different thing. And like Paul just said, even if you're talking about, well, I still have to use my body to feed this kid, you don't need to give that kid one single cell of your body. If you are pregnant, on the other hand, your entire body is functioning to sustain the life of that child, with huge implications, even if it goes entirely well. Pregnancy, as I said before, is not a benign condition in any way. So you are making
That's right.
major life-altering changes to your body, cell by cell, to influence this child's life, as opposed to you, I just don't want to like hold it and feed it anymore. And that's simply not a correct comparison.
All right. So I don't want to interrupt. Is it good for me to respond now?
Sure.
I guess, and then we'll move
Okay.
on. It's been about 30 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. So I got 2 points to make, and this might be it. I understand there's time, but first, if it has to be like cells moving from my body to the child, let's just say in this blizzard, I'm still the only one around, but now I'm actually the mom who's currently breastfeeding. The child needs breast milk. I don't want to give energy that I need from my body to this child. I don't want this child touching me.
They're still
That-
different
that-
things, dude.
Yeah.
You
So
haven't
then I
needed
think
a
it's
good analogy yet.
I think this comes to the bigger thing that might move us somewhere. I'm not sure. I think we have different definitions of bodily autonomy.
We
Even though
clearly
I
do.
agree with the definition.
We very clearly
I
do.
agree with
I think you should look
I
it up
agree.
and then
I-
come
what-
back to call again.
I agree with the definition Mr. Paul said. I fail to see how my examples don't follow it, but that's besides the point. Let me ask another question. Do you believe bodily autonomy is absolute?
I don't know what you mean by that.
Is there anything that can make you violate your right to bodily autonomy?
I mean, these can or should. Like, I don't know what you're getting at.
Should.
To get to the point, what are you
Should.
driving towards?
So I'm saying bodily autonomy is not absolute. There are certain responsibilities that come before that. One is not killing your fellow human organism.
Well, hold on.
Okay.
Go ahead. If you want this to be hypothetical, you now have to use our definition of bodily autonomy, not yours, because we're not playing in
Okay.
your sandbox. So
I agree with
within
you.
with our definition, where we are always allowed to prevent people from harming us, we are always allowed to let people from harming our body. Re-ask the question with that version.
I don't know if I ask a question based off exactly what you said, but that's a little bit different. So you're saying you are allowed to use self-defense for bodily autonomy if there's harm. What if that harm is somebody's going to come accidentally kick you in the leg while they're tripping? How far can you go in self-defense there? Can you kill them before that happens?
That's not the question. The question isn't how far. You were asking, am I always allowed to defend myself? Now you're asking a weird side thing about the appropriateness of the defense. But you and I would agree that there is always a defense that is appropriate. I'm allowed to put a pillow between my shin and your leg.
Right.
There's always a defense that is appropriate. I don't have to let anyone kick me in the shin, right?
I mean, what if the only way to prevent that was to actually kill them?
Yeah. I don't have to let anyone.
So you can use lethal force for me.
No, you're talking. No, so again, you slid this into the if you've created it's always appropriate to defend yourself, and now then we are debating which actions are proportional. Oh, I shouldn't. That thumbs up there is not meant to be a thumbs up for you. You're asking, are you always allowed to defend yourself? And that's what bodily autonomy is. And the answer is yes.
Sure.
You're always allowed to defend yourself.
Even if the only option is lethal force, lethal issue.
You're adding a whole separate thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
You
you,
have different
you're always
perspectives on
right
every
to
notion.
yourself.
Well, I like where you're going.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm now just in a repeat myself land for us. So go ahead.
No. I
Would
liked
you
where
mind
you're
if we
going. I
have
wasn't saying that to stop you. I was saying that
Oh,
just
okay.
I have a totally
time?
different thing just in a minute.
Yeah, please do.
So, Mr. Paul, you're saying you're always allowed to use self-defense to defend yourself. What if the only level of
That's what bodily
self-defense?
autonomy. I'm just saying that's what bodily autonomy is. When we are
What if
talking
the
about
only
bodily
level of
autonomy,
self-defense?
and you want to pose hypotheticals, you need to pose it within that framework
Okay.
for us to
So
give you
if
an answer.
the only level of self-defense to make sure you don't get kicked in the shin. I think that was your framework to make sure you don't get kicked
That
in the
works.
shin. You have
That was
to
a thing,
then-
sure. Yeah.
So if the only way to prevent that from happening is killing the 5-year-old kid to make sure you don't get kicked in the shin, is that appropriate under your standpoint?
I can't picture that.
I
Okay.
I would
let's
say
go-
no, but like, what's the end of that conversation then? Are you going to say that pregnancy is akin to getting kicked in the shin?
No. So I'm saying most pregnancy, actually all pregnancy has risk. Most pregnancy does not have high risk of severe harm. If the severe harm is not high enough to kill this, if it's not high enough to kill this body,
Our definition. So what you're saying is you don't think that people always have the right to defend themselves,
correct.
and we disagree.
And I think
This issue.
so that's kind of what I want to get. And I'm happy we can kind of come to some understanding of each other.
Let me ask you some follow-up questions there, Gohan, and then we'll move on because it's already been 40 minutes and we got several other calls left. But well, let's rapid fire through some of these. You seem like the big hang up here seems to be in like preserving the life of that child. After the child is born, like they could have a terrible life. You're pro-life. You made sure that this person gave birth to a child, and now they have a horrible life of poverty and destitution. Should the mother be forced to go to college and get a degree so that she can get a better job to improve the life of that child and make sure that they don't die long after being born from traceable things like poverty and disease?
I think that's a fair question. And we kind of got into it the last time I called you. I think I was on with Shannon Q and you. But no, I don't think somebody should be forced to give the child best possible outcome. I mean, every parent should be encouraged to do that, but no, you can't be
Okay, so
forced.
you
to be
think
forced.
you think they should be forced to give birth to a child? You think they should be forced to give birth to a child, but there's no obligation then to make sure the child is healthy or safe?
No. So you have to, as a parent, I mean, it depends if you give it up for adoption. If you give a kid up for adoption, you relinquish your rights. But if you're the only one there at the time, then you have a duty to make sure child is safe. And if you don't do
For
that,
example,
then,
where you were talking about how you were the only person around, there is no adoption, right?
yeah,
And
I
you
don't know.
live in,
Yeah.
and you're in abject poverty. You're going to do your best to keep this kid safe, but you live in a dangerous, crime-ridden area. You have a very low fixed income, and you have no good food in the house. You live in a food desert. So there's bad education, bad food, no money, high crime rate. Should this person be forced to improve their life in order to protect that child, or is that child allowed to just live a very violent, very brief life in wherever this place is?
Yeah, so I think this is kind of, I'm sorry I'm bouncing around on different movies. Right now, this is reminding me, except for the crime rate, it's reminding me of Lilo and Stitch. If anybody has seen that movie, when Lilo is getting repossessed by the government because the sister is not able to care for her. The sister doesn't get in trouble, but if somebody doesn't have the ability to
We said in this
give that
we
child
said in this
safety,
example,
they-
there is no one else around. There's no one
Sure.
else this child can go to. There's no government, there's no adoption. I'm asking you,
Okay.
do you think this person should be forced to improve the life of this child even after they are born? Or are they allowed to feed this baby nothing but canned green beans, and then eventually they get shot up walking to school and there's no heat in the house, or are they forced to go to school and get a good education and then get a better income and take care of this kid?
I think if you're doing everything you can for your kid, there's no problem with that. I mean, no, you should not be forced to go get a better education.
So fundamentally, the idea is you just want to force people to give birth. That's the main point. You want to force people who are pregnant to have those children. After that, it's kind of whatever.
Most people kill their kid.
Which would result in them giving birth, right?
But Forrest is describing.
What about this then? Sorry, what about this then? If pregnancy is killing a kid and we want to protect that, wouldn't it make a lot of sense to limit pregnancy? Should we be forcing people to use contraception until they are surely ready to have a child?
No, I mean, I think, again, it's a good idea, but no, I don't think you can force it.
I didn't ask if you can. I said, should we?
No,
I don't think you can end abortion either.
I don't think you should force anyone to use contraception. If I fail to use contraception, how many kids do I directly kill? 0. If I have the abortion, how many
go on to have horrible lives and even be killed by abortion? You're creating the situation in which abortions happen. So should that be stopped?
Am I now culpable for every action that child takes when they grow up too? Or is it just...
Not even what I asked.
So you're saying if I create life and then they get aborted later against my choosing, now I'm responsible for that because I helped create that life? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that you are part of that. You created this life and then it's being ended. So shouldn't we, rather than grappling with whether or not to end a life, just stop life from being made in the first place until we are sure that it's going to happen and it's going to be ready?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very similar to what I think, where if I'm a part of that life being ended later in abortion, I'm also a part of that life becoming a murderer when we grow up. So, I mean,
I'm going to ask the same question then.
I'm saying no. And the reason is because of the example I gave to counter your example.
So when it comes to having sex, you're pro bodily autonomy. Nobody can force you to use contraception. Nobody can force you to decide when to have a kid. After the child is born, you're pro bodily autonomy. Nobody can force you to get an education. Nobody can force you to live your life in any particular way. Nobody can force you on where you're going to live or what kind of situation you're going to be in. But while you are pregnant, all of a sudden bodily autonomy goes out the window. You are forced to carry a child that you don't want. You are forced to allow someone else to live inside your body.
You are so close, because after the child is born, I know you guys disagree with me on this, but I still say you have the duty, regardless of bodily autonomy, to care for that child.
I was the one who brought up duty of care. I didn't say care for them. I said have a healthy and safe life. You can feed your kid and keep them inside and still live in a very dangerous, nasty area. High crime rate, high pollution. You live in Jet, Oklahoma, not Jet, Oklahoma. There's Pitcher, Oklahoma, which has these giant mountains of lead, and people get horrible lead poisoning from living there. It's a ghost town. You could go live in Pitcher, Oklahoma with your child. You're free to do so and make sure that child has a horrible, short, violent, nasty, painful, very short life, because that's bodily autonomy, right?
Get probably to Short, Oklahoma. Where did you say?
Pitcher. Yeah, Pitcher, Oklahoma.
Pitcher, Oklahoma.
That's not a problem. You said?
No, you should not be able to get in trouble for a movie to Pitcher, Oklahoma, which...
What I said is actually completely true. It wasn't wrong. I wasn't very close. I was dead on the money. You think that bodily autonomy applies when you're having sex, and you think the bodily autonomy applies after you've had a kid, but you don't think the bodily autonomy applies while you're pregnant. Paul, I'll let you have the last word, and then we're going to move on. We're 45 minutes in.
Go ahead. What we're trying to describe is not any of the scenarios you're describing. The only thing that bodily autonomy would apply to is if you were on an island with just you and a kid, and the only thing that you could do to save the kid is to feed them parts of your body. That you
Like,
would you be
breast milk,
legally obligated?
pelican.
Would you be legally obligated to chop off your leg to feed it to that child, and then the next day chop off your other leg, and the next day chop off your arm? Are you legally obligated to do that in a scenario where the only way to feed the child is with your body?
Okay, fair question. Now, I understand this might be it for the day, but that's fair. We've been going on for a little while, but
Yeah. So that's what we're talking about with bodily autonomy, where your body is being used for the care.
yes. So
And breast milk
fine,
isn't the
and
same.
This
how
is
is that
super
not?
not.
Why? Are you saying you can
Because
go up to
other,
anybody, or did that
first of
contradict
all,
their bodily autonomy?
first of all, other options beyond breast milk exist. Also, yes, wet nurses do exist, people
Sure,
who do
you're on an
also
island by
breastfeed other
yourself.
people's children. But at the end of the
No,
day, that's
Forrest,
all also up to
Forrest,
them and their bodily autonomy.
sorry, Forrest. Paul said you're on an island by yourself.
You're on an island. Sorry, you're on an island by yourself. Do you, as the dad, are you required to cut off your leg so that your child has something to eat?
Yeah, so that's why I said there's high risk of severe harm. Cutting off my leg would qualify as severe harm.
So you have this weird thing where you think that there are degrees in which where this suddenly stops applying.
That's not just me. I think that's everybody. I think you have the same value. You won't kill somebody unless there's high risk of severe harm.
I just want to be clear, like, you do understand
If there-
that if you have an illness in this situation, there is a higher risk of severe harm than there is for you, right? Like, we're on the same page of that.
Sorry, ask
Like,
that one more time.
inherently, you do understand that if you are a person with a uterus, there is inherently a higher risk of harm in this situation than there is for you, Gohan, as a man, as a phenotypic
Well,
male.
sorry. I don't think I said if I was male or not. But
Well, actually, no. Gohan, hold on. The cutting off your leg, who's at greater risk? The child who's going to starve, or you cutting off your leg?
right, so the child who's going to starve. Sorry, I can respond to Mr. Forrest really quick, and I'll try to respond to yes. But Forrest, it was, you were saying that the woman or the uterus person has more risk, and that's 100% true. Whoever has the uterus is going to have harm. There's 100% of harm coming to that person, 100% chance. The only question is, how high is that harm? How severe is that harm? Is that harm getting kicked in the shin, or is it losing the leg? If it's losing a leg, I say you have the right to use legal self-defense, just as you would if a 20-year-old man is trying to chop off your leg. You have the right to self-defense. But if it's low harm, then
Pretty obvious.
you don't have the
I
right
mean,
to legal self-defense.
I think it's pretty obvious that it's way, way more severe than getting kicked in the chin and the shin, and extends right up all the way to death. And even in average cases, has lifelong side effects that are no way pleasant. It sounds like we're talking in circles, and we've been
not
doing this
denying it.
call for twice as long as any other call. So we're gonna go ahead and move on, Gohan. But I
Thank you,
appreciate you
guys.
calling.
Fair.
I'm just glad that Shannon Q wasn't here, because I think she wouldn't have cared about this call at all. I think she would have been really boring. She just wouldn't have been interested in this call. You know, she didn't really have much to say about this topic, and
Yeah.
I'm glad I had you.
I was
another.
She is down the hall, and I actually kind of was wondering if she might burst in at some point, but we'll see.
No, I think she doesn't care. I think that the best
no,
time.
she's just bored. Right.
I think
She's
the
apathetic
best
towards
outcome
this.
for that call. I think the best way that call could have been handled is to have two white men talk about it as best as we. I think that's the best way to do it. Is just to have us
Ideal
two guys.
scenario, yes, absolutely.
It's
There's a real
seriously is.
shortage of
Shannon-
white dudes talking about shit.
It's talking about abortion, exactly. Yeah, Shannon would have
Yeah.
just she wouldn't have understood. I don't think she would have understood. I think that's the problem.
No.
She's gonna drive to Oklahoma to slap me.